I was completely stunned when my husband, Jonathan, abruptly suggested that I should move back to my parents' house, even though they were already living with us. His sudden declaration left me speechless. He spoke as if his suggestion were perfectly reasonable and, in a sharp tone, asked, "Do you have a problem with that? Don't argue with me. I'm fine with divorcing you if you do." His behavior had grown cold and distant recently, and I had been grappling with my own frustrations. While I had entertained the thought of divorce in passing, I never imagined he would be the one to push me out of our home, especially when I was the one covering our $3,200 monthly expenses. Did he even acknowledge that? As I stood there in disbelief, his agitation grew. "Leave this house now. My parents won't feel comfortable with you here," he demanded. I couldn't understand why I was suddenly the one expected to leave. But in that moment, I agreed. "Fine. I'll take all my things with me," I replied. He seemed smugly satisfied with my compliance and, without another word, said, "Then do it," before walking away. Without hesitation, I called a service to sell my belongings. "My name is Betty, and I live with Jonathan, who's 3 years older than me. We met through mutual friends, and what began as a casual introduction turned into an entire day spent together." Jonathan had shared his dream of becoming a voiceover artist, and I was drawn to his deep, soothing voice. I've always been fond of such tones. Apparently, he felt a similar connection. As we exchanged numbers and began planning more outings, before long, we were in a relationship, though it happened so naturally that there was no formal discussion about it. At the time, I had just graduated college and started my career. Dating someone with more life experience, like Jonathan, felt exciting. My friend Laura expressed concerns about the age difference, but I dismissed them. "It's only 3 years," I told her confidently. I genuinely liked Jonathan and believed in his affection for me. Eventually, Laura accepted my choice, trusting my judgment. Jonathan and I had been together for 2 years when the topic of marriage came up. I had already introduced him to my parents, who were excited about our future together. I often wondered when he would propose, and in typical Jonathan fashion, it happened during a casual visit to my apartment. We were lounging around when, without much fanfare, he popped the question. I responded just as casually, "Sure, let's get married." We both seemed to approach the idea with a laid-back attitude. Afterward, we visited each other's parents, but it quickly became clear that I didn't quite fit in with his family. Their home was overly decorated to mimic old-fashioned luxury, but it felt forced. His parents wore expensive clothes and flashy jewelry, clearly trying to project wealth. It was obvious that our tastes and values didn't align, and I doubted we'd ever truly get along. During the visit, his mother even made a hurtful comment about my appearance. I was shocked that the family of the man I planned to marry could be so rude. Still, I reminded myself that I was marrying Jonathan, not his family. I resolved to limit my interactions with them and not let it bother me. After the wedding, as we settled into our new condo, I began to notice a change in Jonathan. He seemed distracted and distant. One day, out of nowhere, he asked, "Hey, who was that woman in the blue dress at our wedding?" Since several guests had worn blue, I couldn't immediately place who he meant. "Which woman in the blue dress?" I asked. "You know, the one who gave a speech as your best friend," he clarified. "Are you talking about Laura?" I replied, realizing she had worn a blue dress. "Yes, that's her," Jonathan said, his tone carrying a hint of unease. "What's wrong with Laura?" I asked, sensing something off. "Oh, it's nothing," he said, brushing it off. "I thought I saw someone who looked like her on my way to work." His expression was uneasy, and before I could press further, he laughed awkwardly and retreated to his room. Not long after, Laura called me, brimming with excitement. "Betty, My boyfriend's coming back to Canada next year, she exclaimed. Laura and her boyfriend had been together since high school, maintaining their connection despite his move abroad for work. Their relationship was inspiring, and I teased her. Do you think he'll propose when he's back? Maybe, she giggled, but you're always jumping ahead, Betty. Well, if he does, make sure to invite me to the wedding, I joked. I'll expect another heartfelt speech like the one you gave at mine. Of course, she said, laughing. Around this time, Jonathan's routine started changing. He began coming home later and later. Working late again tonight? I asked one evening as he walked in. Yeah, why? Do you think I shouldn't work? He snapped, defensiveness creeping into his voice. Jonathan was still chasing his dream of becoming a voiceover artist, and while I admired his dedication, the financial strain was taking its toll. He juggled several part-time jobs to fund his training, but all his earnings went toward that goal, leaving me to cover all our living expenses. Saving money together felt impossible, and the cracks in our relationship were growing deeper with every passing day. As Jonathan's hours at his part-time job grew longer, my concern deepened. Hey, have you been working too much lately? I asked, trying to sound supportive. They shouldn't be making you do so much overtime, especially for a part-time job. He brushed me off, unwilling to discuss it, but deep down, I knew this relentless pursuit of his dream was creating a rift between us, both financially and emotionally. One day, I couldn't hold back. I'm worried, I told him. I'm fine. More money is always better. Just keep your opinions to yourself, Jonathan snapped, his tone colder than ever. By then, he had grown distant, barely acknowledging me and avoiding using my name altogether. He referred to me only as you when we spoke. I had hoped marriage would bring us closer, but his words had turned sharp and dismissive. The gentle voice I once loved was now rough and harsh. Jonathan had also been drinking more, his voice growing hoarse, a troubling issue for someone aspiring to be a voiceover artist. Yet, he refused to discuss his health or make any changes. Conversations became rare, and eventually, he started avoiding me altogether, even when we were in the same room. Amid this growing tension, my best friend Laura called, saying she had something important to discuss. Desperate for a break from the chaos at home, I agreed to meet her at a cafe. When we arrived, Laura chose a booth with a clear view of the counter and staff. You picked this spot on purpose, I said, noticing her cautious demeanor. Yes, she replied, her expression serious. I wanted the staff to see if someone suspicious is around. A suspicious person? Is that what you wanted to talk about? I asked, concerned. Laura nodded, her face tight with worry. She explained that ever since she left her job a month ago, she'd felt like someone was following her. Lately, she even sensed being watched on her days off. She picked that booth out of fear that her stalker might try to eavesdrop. Have you gone to the police? I asked. I did, but they said there's not much they can do without direct contact. She sighed. What about your boyfriend? Isn't he coming back next month? Maybe he can help, I suggested. I'm planning to tell him, but I wanted to talk to you first. You're closer, she explained. Her unease was palpable, and I understood her need for immediate support. She hadn't gotten a clear look at her stalker, making the situation even more frightening. Determined to help, I discreetly started watching from a distance, hoping to identify who was following her. But as I grappled with Laura's predicament, my own troubles with Jonathan weighed heavily on me. Then I made a shocking discovery. The person stalking Laura was none other than my husband, Jonathan. After his shifts, he lingered near Laura's workplace and followed her when she left. Seeing him do this was beyond unsettling. The man responsible for my best friend's fear was my own husband. His disturbing grin as he followed Laura chilled me to the bone. The love I once felt for him turned to ice. I told Laura the truth and urged her to move immediately for her safety. With help from her colleagues, we arranged for someone to drive her from the underground parking lot to a new residence, taking every precaution to ensure she remained safe. As Laura made her escape, Jonathan's frustration grew. One day, he exploded. "My parents are going to live here, so you need to go back to your parents' house," he demanded, completely out of the blue. I was stunned. Why should I leave? I'm the one paying the $3,200 rent every month, I said, trying to stay calm. "If you have a problem with that, then fine, we'll divorce," he spat, his temper boiling over. Though I had considered divorce many times, hearing him say it so callously hit me hard, but his arrogance made my next steps clear. The following day, I contacted a buyback service to sell all the furniture and appliances I had paid for. When the workers arrived, Jonathan's smug demeanor vanished. "What are you doing?" he demanded as they started evaluating everything. "They're here to sell what's mine," I said evenly. "But my parents are moving in. How can they live here without furniture?" he cried. "That's your problem now," I replied. "When we got married, you told me you were broke because of your acting classes. I paid for everything: rent, furniture, living expenses. Now you can handle the $3,200 yourself." Jonathan paled, desperate. He tried to save face. "You think this will stop me? I've already gotten close to a rich lady," he sneered, striking a ridiculous pose. His words made my blood boil, but I stayed composed. Remembering his stalking of Laura, I realized his idea of getting close was more twisted than I thought. Jonathan wasn't the man I thought I'd married, and now, I was finally free to walk away. It infuriated me that Jonathan believed wealth made someone more desirable. The truth was undeniable: Laura would never be interested in him. She had been with her high school sweetheart for years, and he was returning soon with plans to marry her. Jonathan's delusions would inevitably crumble, and I had no intention of sticking around to witness his downfall. When I mentioned that Laura felt uneasy because someone had been stalking her, Jonathan seemed startled. He was visibly shocked to learn that Laura found him creepy and that their relationship wasn't as close as he imagined. "I always walked Laura home," he defended, his tone desperate. "You're lucky I didn't call the police," I retorted, my voice cutting. "But I didn't know she had a boyfriend," Jonathan stammered. "She picked me over someone she doesn't even know. They've been writing letters since they were kids, and they talk almost every day," I replied firmly. "Unlike you, with your part-time jobs, her boyfriend is successful and already has her family's approval." Jonathan's face fell, a profound sadness washing over him as reality set in. His fantasies about a life with Laura were nothing but delusions, and the truth had finally shattered them. When the movers arrived to collect our belongings, Jonathan tried to mask his discomfort, even feigning relief. "I guess you're all I've got now," he said with an uneasy laugh. "You've always supported my dream of being a voiceover artist, haven't you?" I met his gaze with steely resolve. "Not anymore," I said flatly. "I've already filed for divorce. From now on, we'll communicate through our lawyers." Jonathan's confidence crumbled, and he clung to me in desperation. "Don't say that. Haven't we been getting along this whole time?" I shook my head, unmoved by his tears. "We've been going downhill ever since our wedding. You've been distant and fixated on Laura the moment you found out about her family's wealth. I see now that marrying you was a mistake." Jonathan broke down in sobs, his childish display doing nothing to soften my resolve. I couldn't stand being near him any longer. "Enough," I snapped. "I've also spoken to your uncle about the divorce. You'll be working for him now. As for your dream of becoming a voiceover artist, I won't be funding it anymore. You barely practiced anyway. It's time to face reality." I turned to leave but paused to deliver one final warning. and stay away from Laura. If you don't, I won't hesitate to call the police." With that, I walked out, determined not to look back. For the time being, I moved in with my parents, though I was already considering relocating closer to my workplace. As expected, Jonathan ended up working for his uncle, and his parents, who had planned to rely on Laura's wealth, moved in with him instead. All three of them were now under his uncle's employment, proving that exploiting others ran in their family. I felt an immense sense of relief as I distanced myself from that toxic environment. Age wasn't the issue here. I vowed to be far more cautious in choosing my next partner. On a brighter note, Laura later invited me to her wedding. Meeting her long-term boyfriend and witnessing their happiness brought genuine joy to my heart. As I celebrated with them, I felt grateful for a fresh start and hopeful for the future.